Hey, what's up, family? This is part 2 of how I got started in music. If you haven't seen part 1, look at my videos right there on my page, on my timeline, and you'll see part 1. And this is part 2 to give you a little bit more information to who I am, how I got started, and how I got to where I am today. Thank you for joining. And these videos, along with the rest of my upcoming advice, educational tutorials, behind the scenes and inside my life, these will all be also available on my YouTube channel as well at Aaron Hills Music. So part 2, where I left off in part 1 was that I had just gotten a job as a full-time musician in the church. I went from hip-hop, and I wanted to learn how to play the piano. I wanted to learn more about music because I was doing pretty well. Got a little bit of light there, maybe. All right, that's a little better. Things were going really well. And so I was able to land a job to do my dream full-time. So inspiration to anybody following anything out there. You can do it. Because I was working in auto parts, and I wanted to be a full-time musician. And so when the opportunity came, I jumped on it, and here I am today, 15 years later, and I can say that I've done music full-time since and have created a couple successful businesses out of it. So at that point, I'm playing for the church, and what that gave me was the opportunity to be a manager over multiple things, people, music, events and dates and that kind of thing. And I was already a really organized person. That's actually my strength, really. I think that's my strength more than musical talent, to be honest, is my discipline. And so with that being said, I wind up doing that as far as playing in the church from 2002 up until, I would say, close to 2012. And it was wonderful because I got a chance to study music every day, all day. So I developed a schedule for myself, like I was just like the job that I just come from. I used to go to the church in the morning, and when the secretary was there, and I'd practice and take different materials, have different objectives. I had a schedule, had it written out, and I would work up until maybe like noon, and I would take a lunch break, come back again for a couple more hours. Because if you didn't see part 1, I'll just add this in there. When I took the first musical job that I had, which was playing for the church, when I took it, I only knew like 10 songs. I had like 10 songs to my name. But the thing I promised myself was that if I got the opportunity, I was going to take my time. And not take my time, I was going to jump on it. And I was going to go from that 10 songs to another 10 songs the next week, and that's exactly what happened. Sometimes it's okay to put yourself in a situation where it's a shoe that's a little bit bigger than what you can currently fit. And I apologize about my congestion too. This is day 2 of congestion as well. But sometimes it's worthwhile to put yourself in a situation where it's a shoe that's slightly larger than what you can fit, because it'll be just enough to motivate you to fit that shoe. Like, you don't want to go crazy and put yourself in a situation that's that you way underqualified, for. But if you're like 2 or 3 steps behind, sometimes it's worthwhile to do it, because that sometimes gives you the motivation in order to meet up to that demand. And whatever that is, whether you need to educate yourself a little bit more on the subject, whether you need to practice more, whether you need to do some other things like make phone calls and, set things up, and just things that are investment in your dream. So that's what happened to me. I know 10 songs and I got to run a whole church. So what happened was the next week I had another 10 songs. And before you know it, in the time span, I didn't start playing keyboards. This is for all the musicians out there, and really everybody. Like, interestingly, I didn't start playing keyboards until I was like 19, as far as even studying. I didn't start playing until I was 21. So I'm 35 now, and a lot of people was like, man, in that time period, like between 2002 and 2006. I mean, I learned like something like, you know, I might have learned like 150 contemporary songs, maybe like 300 hymns, like, and anthems. Like, it was crazy. But the thing is, I was double timing it. You know, I was put into a situation where I had to meet up, and that's what I wanted. I had to meet up to the standard, and so that's what I did. In the midst of that time, the next part of the chapter is that when I got this job, there was a guy who's a buddy of mine, now he's a buddy of mine. His name is Steven Anderson, and they were the church, because I didn't have that much experience and I just started. They were still looking for somebody who had more experience, even though they wanted to keep me on board because of my skill level and the potential they could see with me. So they had an ad in the newspaper, and in this ad, January 1st came, and there was a guy who answered the ad, but it was at the same time when they decided they were going to give me the job. Oh, sidebar, please drop all your questions and comments and everything, because I answer all the questions and comments, so please, that's how I want to engage with you. Of course, I can't do it right now, but definitely do that. So anyway, Steven Anderson, he's a guy who answers the ad in the newspaper for a musician. When he comes there, they didn't take the ad out, but they had just decided they were going to give me the job. So they didn't know what to do or what to say. It just so happened, he walks up to me and he realizes that I'm the musician, and he doesn't know what to do. It's awkward. So we introduce ourselves to each other, and then that became a 10-year, like, extremely close relationship. And the reason why was because we both had similar personalities. He was a guy who, his background was jazz, and he was trying to learn gospel, and at that time I had learned gospel and I was trying to learn jazz. So it literally was a match made. You know, we connected, and we shared music with each other and helped each other to grow. But beyond that, like, we just shared similar life perspectives, and so we became best friends. He introduced me. I was already starting to dig into jazz on my own. He introduced me to some resources that to this day wound up being the resources that really helped me to get to where I am now, as far as jazz is concerned. And so I started studying jazz. You know, I skipped a part of my story though. I forgot to tell you guys that before this, when I taught myself how to read music, I went to community college for a short period of time, and I studied classical music there with a Russian teacher, and that was really good. But the funny part about that story was that because she was classical, she sat me down on the couch one day, and she played like this book of, I mean, it was like a novel, and it was like one song, and she had it all memorized. It was absolutely amazing. I'm sitting on the couch flipping page to page to page to page like I'm reading a book. And she had all this music memorized. The funny thing was, I sat down at the piano and I was showing her what I had learned. And it literally was like 2 notes. It was like 2 notes that you could play that was like an improvisational idea. And her face turned red, but not in anger or disgust. These 2 notes opened up her mind to like the possibilities. And it was absolutely amazing. Like, that was another instance, like I said in part 1, about giving back and how it made me feel. So I studied classical for a short period of time in community college. The other thing I left out, which I literally got to diverge because this is a huge part of my life, is while I was trying to get into the music full time, I wound up going to school for my dream, which was to be an audio engineer. I wound up being able to attend Sheffield Institute for the Recording Arts in 2001. Around the same time I started learning how to play the piano. And that was my goal from high school. Because of the fact that I was a rapper and I was a producer, a hip-hop producer, I thought to myself, trying to be as wise as possible. I'm like, not everybody makes it. Most people don't make it, you know, when it comes to being an MC. Now we live in the best times ever where you don't need a major deal and that kind of thing. But at that time, in 97 to 2001, I mean, we were still searching for record deals. So I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, what's a plan B? I need a plan B that will keep me in the same field, but give me something that gives me security, and I'm still close enough to the music where I can be an artist and I can do my thing as a producer and as a MC at that time, right? And so that's what audio engineering was for me. The problem was I couldn't go because the school at the time had a tuition of $9,500, and they didn't take financial aid and they didn't take grants at that time. So I didn't have the money, and I didn't have the help as far as the money. So I just went to community college in order to try to keep moving forward in a positive way. And that was good, but I knew, like, I never wanted to, my goal was, I appreciated college, but I was already, it made it bad because I was already working full-time as a musician, so I wanted more so specialty classes because I didn't need all of the extracurricular classes. I could study science. I mean, I'm a science buff on my own. You know, I'm a history buff on my own. But I understood the program. It's just that it didn't work for me. And that's, I guess you could say, a sidebar for anybody out there that's trying to force yourself into a system that you're doing it because you feel like it's the right thing to do, but you know good and well, like, it's not really you. And I say, like, don't let that go. Just find a formula that fits right, so that way you're only going to be the best for the world. Like, if you're really doing what you want to do and in the way you want to do it, with making as little sacrifices as possible, little compromises as possible. So that's where I was. I was going to community college, but I still had my eyes set on Sheffield, and then I later auditioned for Peabody. I didn't make it into Peabody, and I have to say, no disrespect to any Peabody staff, but fortunately I didn't make it in because the debt that I would have been in was crazy. And plus, it wouldn't have fit what I do in my life now as a producer, entrepreneur, as well as musician. It would only give me one side of the coin. So anyway, with that being said, and this is probably going to be about maybe 10 more minutes. I'll stop it, pick it back up with part 3. I hope y'all appreciate this. With that being said, I can't get to Sheffield, and I go back to community college. At some point in community college, I was taking music classes over and over and over and over to the point where they were like, sir, you can't get any more credit for this. And I was like, I know, but it's what I wanted to do. It's what I want to do. So I eventually applied for Morgan because I knew they had a decent music program, especially as far as jazz. Shout out to my friends who went to Morgan. They got great educations and great experiences. I didn't make it into Morgan. Well, actually, I could have made it into Morgan, but somehow they gave me the runaround until the start of the semester, and I couldn't get in because it was a problem as far as my credits. So I called Sheffield, and I figured the closest I would get would be talking to an administrator on the phone. Like, if I never went, I'd be like, well, at least I talked to someone, and I was like right there. And so I'm talking to them, and I kind of played dumb. Me playing dumb was, I asked them how much the program was. Sorry, I'm looking at directions. I asked them how much the program was. Truth be told, I knew how much the program was. I really did. And so the thing was, just by doing that, they told me in that moment, they said, well, if you don't have the money, we now have a brand new kind of program. And we're working with, at that time, the Northwest Career Center, which was at Mondawmin Mall. And they said, if you go down there, they have a program, a trade program where, and you guys know what these are like, where there's a program to try to help people in like inner city or poverty-stricken areas to do better. And so it's a program that you can go to school for like plumbing, you can go to school for construction, and just, a good job and they'll give you money toward the tuition. It just so happens Sheffield was a part of this, which to me still is mind-blowing to this day, because it's usually not the kind of school you would see on a list like that. But it happened to be. So I went to the Career Center, and they gave me a $7,500 grant. So all I had to pay was $2,000. And it worked out, and I went to Sheffield. Don't give up on your dreams. Like, don't give up on your dreams. I couldn't let it go. But I was just like, I know that this school is for me, because the thing about Sheffield, and that's a school right out here in Phoenix, Maryland, you're in the studio. Like, you're not studying in a classroom and then trying to go out into the world and figure it out later on, 4 years later. Like, you're in the studio, they're teaching you in the studio, and it's hands-on. You're not studying any other subjects other than studio recording. So I was fortunate to go there. It was one of the best experiences ever. And I graduated in 2002. I wound up going back to community college just because I wanted to have some extra layers of education and just make sure I was secure and covered. A couple years later is when I started my business. But with that being said, I finished Sheffield, and then I'm playing in the church, and then I also had another great thing that happened. And shout out to my homie Kier Johnson. We just finished having a conversation about 15-20 minutes ago, and I was actually telling him about this part of the story that I think people will really dig about his story. I met Kier Johnson because I was with my group in the studio recording, and we were going to a studio, and that's where I met Kier, and I became a part of his company. And the thing about that was good was the only thing I was experienced with at that point, when it came down to playing music and doing something outside of just hip-hop and really gospel at that point. I was mainly gospel. I didn't have any other situations that I was a part of, and what his company brought to the table was I got a chance to learn jazz, to play with a band, because I had never really played with a band like that, and to really grow, like in the midst of a band, in the midst of jazz and just other styles of music. And that was really, really good, because when I was playing in church, it was just myself and a drummer, and although we had a great time, I wasn't able to learn what it was like to play with other personalities and to understand the music in parts. So that was really good. That's the next part of my story. There's like several things happening at the same time too, of course, as you can imagine. So I got this church thing going on, and all that's going on with that. Then I meet my buddy Kier Johnson, and then become part of his company and get a lot of experience with that, out here doing gigs and just all kinds of great stuff. And then at the same time, I'm studying jazz. I'm still in college because I was studying theory and ear training in college. But I was trying to switch over to Peabody because, again, specialty school. But now that I know, I didn't realize that you have to also take electives and that kind of thing there. But it's still more so music-based than some of the other programs. So I didn't make it there. But in 2006, I had an idea to start my own company. I was a producer at that point. I was an engineer at that point. And I knew just how to put the picture together. It was all familiar to me. I knew how to put the picture together. And so at this point, I'm just like, I was into instrumental music, and I decided, I really don't want to be a producer that's just a freelance producer for everybody. I mean, I think it's absolutely great. I just never felt like that was my path. I started getting into, at that time, from gospel to like jazz, like smooth jazz, and then I became a gospel jazz artist and developed a band and went from there. And so that was where my head was, doing my own music at that time. And I also liked to make tracks. So I said, you know what, I want to create a resource where I could work with individuals that don't have bands, and I can make instrumental tracks for them. And so it started out working with a few people around town and just doing it for a small fee, like $50 a track. I remember those days, $50 a track. I mean, I would put in like hours and hours and hours and hours to make a $50 to make $50 off it. But, and this is a sidebar, what I was looking at was building clientele, building relationships, and really getting myself into a place of what I really, really wanted to do. And then I could build on that. And that's exactly what happened. Because after a year and a half of doing that, I had the idea to start my own performance track company. And so I started a gospel performance track company called Fruition Music Incorporated Gospel Tracks. And then I went on to take that to, in I would say, from 2008, I would say 6 years, it became a six-figure year in business. And I'm going to do a video that literally is just how I built a six-figure year business, to be able to help people that are trying to really build business, you know, to build a really good and solid business at six figures. So that really changed my life. You know, that really changed my life. When I started that company, I knew exactly what I wanted, and I just had to get the wheels turning. The cool part is I had to take a few risks, but I had to take smart risks in order to make it happen. And that's what I want to get into. I think I might pause here, just because I want to make this in segments. So I'll pause there. We'll stop at the part where I'm an audio engineer. I'm working with a company that I'm in a band. I'm learning jazz and hip hop. I'm able to also get into business as well. I'm into jazz, learning it formally, and I'm starting my company. So, yeah, I'll stop there. Drop your questions, your comments, and everything. And when I jump back on, I'll pick it up from there, and we'll keep it moving. I hope y'all appreciate that. Stay tuned for part 3. Peace.